The mountain wind carried the scent of pine resin and human desperation. Inside Grant's trading post at Fort Massachusetts, lamplight flickered across shelves stocked with pelts, ammunition, and whiskey, the currency of frontier survival. But tonight, the transaction was different. Tonight, a human life changed hands. Kaya Blackwater stood motionless in the corner, wrists bound with leather straps, her Apache buckskin dress torn at the shoulder, revealing bruises in the pattern of fingerprints. She didn't cry by him. Apache women didn't cry in front of enemies. But her dark eyes, those eyes with amber flecks her mother once called blessed by dawn, burned with calculation. She was counting exits, counting weapons, counting seconds until opportunity arrived. 3 years. 3 years since her cousin Dakota sold her to a white drunk for 2 rifles and a horse. 3 years of beatings, rapes disguised as marital duty, forced labor in the sluice boxes. Her hands, once skilled at weaving medicine pouches, now permanently cracked from icy water and lye soap. She had tried to escape twice. The first time, bounty hunters dragged her back and whipped her until her back looked like a map of hell. The second time, she nearly froze to death in November snow and crawled back out of necessity, not choice. This time would be different. This time she had nothing left to lose. Boone Fletcher stumbled through the trading post door, whiskey fumes rolling off him like fog off a swamp. His eyes were red from 3 days of gambling, 3 days of losing, 3 days of watching his future dissolve into a pile of worthless cards and empty promises. Behind the counter, Silas Grant smiled the way a snake smiles at a wounded rabbit. Grant was a different breed of frontier predator, Boston-educated, well-dressed even in this wilderness outpost, speaking with cultivated vowels that made his evil sound civilized. He'd come west not to build but to exploit, not to settle but to extract. Indians, Mexicans, Chinese laborers, anyone without power became his merchandise. Fletcher slammed his fist on the counter, the sound hollow and desperate. $340, a life-destroying debt for a failed prospector. Grant's voice was smooth as aged whiskey and just as poisonous. "I'm afraid I can no longer accept promissory notes, Mr. Fletcher. You've exhausted my patience along with my generosity." Fletcher's hands shook. Not from fear, from need. The gambling sickness had its claws deep in him now, and it wouldn't let go until it had consumed everything. His claim, his dignity, his soul. "I got nothing left," Fletcher said, and the words came out broken. "The claims played out, equipment sold. I got nothing." Grant's eyes drifted to the corner, to Kaya. "I wouldn't say nothing." Fletcher followed his gaze. Understanding dawned slowly through the whiskey fog. "She's my wife," Fletcher said, but his voice already carried the sound of negotiation. "Legal married." Grant laughed, short and sharp. "Her signature on that marriage paper is worthless, and we both know it. She's property, Fletcher, and property can be transferred." Kaya's fingers tightened around the hem of her dress. She understood every word. 3 years of living with Fletcher had taught her English alongside brutality. She knew what was coming next. The only question was whether she'd fight now or wait for better opportunity. She chose to wait. Apache patience. The mountain lion doesn't leap at the first rustle. She waits for the perfect moment. Grant laid out his offer with the precision of a man who'd made such deals before. Clear Fletcher's debt. Add $50 cash. All for the Apache woman with the amber eyes. Fletcher's moment of hesitation lasted maybe 3 seconds. Conscience against greed. Humanity against addiction. The addiction won. It always did. "She can cook," Fletcher said weakly, one last flicker of something human trying to justify the inhuman. "Clean. She's useful." "She'll be very useful," Grant said, and his smile widened. "Just not to you anymore." The handshake was brief. The money exchanged hands with practiced efficiency. Kaya Blackwater, daughter of Blue Heron, granddaughter of Two Moons, had just been sold for the price of a decent horse. Fletcher didn't look back as he stumbled out into the October darkness, $50 richer and infinitely poorer in soul. He didn't see Kaya's face as the door closed, didn't hear Grant's low chuckle as he turned to his 2 enforcers waiting in the shadows. "Gentlemen, prepare our merchandise for the Denver buyers." But Kaya heard, and Kaya remembered her mother's last words. spoken in blood as cavalry bullets tore through their camp. You are Mountain Lion's daughter. When cornered, you bear fangs. The two men who approached her were archetypes of frontier violence. Wade Carver, 32 years old with a scarred face and Confederate Raiders' eyes, the kind of man who enjoyed cruelty for its own sake. Dutch Miller, younger but massive, a former buffalo hunter who killed without thought or feeling, following orders like a trained dog follows commands. Grant's instructions were clinical. Clean her up, break her spirit if needed. She ships to Denver tomorrow morning. The brothel owner prefers them docile, but I imagine he can work with defiant if that's what we deliver. Wade grabbed Kaya's arm, fingers digging into bruised flesh. She didn't resist yet, still waiting, still watching. They dragged her through the trading post to a back room that reeked of whiskey spilled on floorboards, raw leather, male sweat, and tobacco smoke. One window nailed shut, a fireplace with dying embers, stacked pelts of beaver and wolf, a locked door, and there, leaning against the stone hearth, an iron poker. Kaya cataloged everything in the half-second it took Dutch to shove her toward the center of the room. Apache training from childhood. Know your terrain, know your weapons, know your moment. Wade circled her like a wolf around wounded elk, and his breath stank of rot-gut whiskey and decay when he grabbed her jaw, forcing her to meet his eyes. Pretty little half-breed, you understand English? She stayed silent. Assessment before engagement. The Apache way. I asked you a question. His voice rose and his grip tightened until bone ground against bone. She spat in his face. The slap came fast, knuckles across her cheekbone. Stars exploded in her vision and she tasted copper. But she smiled through the blood, and that smile said everything her silence hadn't. I am not afraid of you. You're gonna regret that, squaw. Dutch moved behind her, arms like tree trunks pinning her arms back. She felt his breathing change, felt his excitement building, and her stomach turned even as her mind stayed cold and calculating. Wade's hands went to her dress, tearing at the buckskin her mother had made before the cavalry came. The sound of fabric ripping was obscenely loud in the small room. She waited one more second, two, then she moved. Her heel slammed backward into Dutch's knee, an Apache fighting technique learned from warriors who knew that size meant nothing against precision. He howled and his grip loosened just enough. She twisted, sank her teeth into his forearm, tasted blood and leather and fear. Wade lunged at her, rage overtaking lust. His fist caught her in the stomach and air exploded from her lungs. She fell toward the fireplace, consciousness dimming at the edges. Her hand touched iron, still warm from the evening fire. Heavy, solid, real. Time slowed the way it does when death comes close. Apache reflexes, trained since childhood for deer hunting, now applied to survival itself. Her fingers closed around the poker and her whole life, every beating, every violation, every day of being treated as less than human, poured into her grip. Wade lunged again. His hands reached for her throat. She swung. The sound was biblical, like river ice breaking in spring thaw. Wet, final, absolute. The poker connected with Wade's temple at the precise point where skull meets spine. Blood sprayed in an arterial arc, hot and red and sudden. His eyes went wide, then empty. He collapsed, body twitching once, twice, then utterly still. Dutch froze, hands still clutching his ruined face where her teeth had torn flesh. Jesus Christ, you killed him. You killed. She was already pivoting. Second swing, all her strength, all her rage, all her refusal to be property ever again. The poker caught Dutch's jaw, bone shattered with a sound like dry branches snapping. He went down screaming, both hands now trying to hold his face together. Kaya stood over them, chest heaving, poker dripping red onto floorboards that had seen violence before but never quite like this. She stared at Wade's body, at the pool spreading beneath his ruined head. Dead? Unconscious? Did it matter? Voices outside, footsteps approaching. Grant's voice calling out, asking what the hell was taking so long. No time to check, no time to think, only time to move. She grabbed a blanket from the pile of pelts, wrapped it around her torn dress, and ran for the back door leading to the storage room. Behind her, Dutch's screams grew louder, more desperate, and she knew he was alerting everyone to what she'd done. The storage room door banged open. Cold October air hit her like a fist. She ran, barefoot through frost that bit worse than any whip Fletcher had ever used. Pine needles stabbed her soles. Rocks drew blood with every step. But she ran. Behind her, the chaos erupted. Men shouting, dogs barking, torches appearing in the darkness like angry stars. Grant's voice surprisingly calm through the confusion. Find her. She murdered 2 men, $100 bounty, dead or alive. I prefer alive. The words chased her into the Ponderosa forest, into the darkness where the blood moon hung overhead like a prophecy. Her Apache instincts activated. Knowledge passed down through generations of people who'd survived in this land long before white men came with their papers and their ownership. She ran through the creek, icy water numbing her legs but washing away the scent that dogs would follow. She used pine branches to sweep her tracks. She climbed onto rocky outcrops where boot prints wouldn't register. She hid under an overhang while searchers passed within 15 feet, their torches casting dancing shadows through the trees. She held her breath until her lungs screamed, blanket pressed tight against her chest, and prayed to her mother's gods that darkness would keep her invisible. 1 hour into the flight, adrenaline kept her warm. 2 hours in, the shivering began. 3 hours, hypothermia crept into her bones with cold fingers. 4 hours, hallucinations started. She saw her mother's face in the trees, heard her speaking Apache. Shinai Kaya, be strong, daughter. But strength was bleeding out with every cut, every shiver, every breath that clouded in the frozen air. She couldn't return to Fletcher. Even if he'd take her back, which was doubtful, Grant would find her there. She couldn't reach Apache territory. 300 miles south through hostile land in her condition meant certain death. She couldn't approach any town. By now, Grant would have sent word, wanted for murder, shoot on sight. Only one option remained. The ghost stories. Prospectors whispered about him around campfires. The Phantom of Timber Ridge. A white man who lived alone in the high peaks. Some said he was mad. Others said he was dead, just a spirit haunting the mountains. But spirits don't set rabbit snares. And she'd seen fresh snares 2 miles back. If the ghost was real, maybe he'd help. If he wasn't, she'd freeze to death by dawn anyway. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. She climbed higher as the night wore on, following game trails by feel more than sight. Her feet left bloody prints in the thin snow. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel. Her thoughts came slow and thick like cold honey. When dawn finally touched the eastern peaks with fingers of gold and crimson, she found the snare line. Fresh, well-made. Professional trapper's work. She followed it upward through an aspen grove, each step requiring more will than the last. Her legs gave out near a fallen ponderosa. Just stopped working, muscles refusing commands. She collapsed against the rough bark, blankets slipping from her shoulders. This is how it ends, she thought with strange clarity. At least I died free. At least I died fighting. Then she saw him, 30 yards upslope, emerging from the morning mist like something conjured from smoke and shadow. Tall, broad-shouldered, bearded, wearing buckskin and a bearskin cloak that made him look more animal than man. A Sharps rifle in his hands, held with the casual competence of someone who'd used it often and well. The ghost was real. Jacob Stone had been watching for 10 minutes. Old scout habit, observe before engaging, never approach unknown humans quickly. He'd tracked her for the last mile. Blood trail, obvious even in dim light. Hypothermia gait, unmistakable to anyone who'd seen it before. Running from something, clearly. What he saw was an Apache woman, early 20s, bare feet bleeding, wearing a torn dress and one blanket. Bruises on her face in the clear pattern of someone's fist. Rope burns on her wrists. Classic abuse pattern. He'd seen it before, and the memory of where and when made his chest tighten. Rebecca. His wife had looked like that once, after the Cheyenne took her. He'd found her 3 days later, barely alive, destroyed inside and out. He'd failed Rebecca. But maybe... The woman tried to stand, failed, tried again. Her legs buckled like a newborn deer's. Jacob approached slowly, rifle lowered but not put away. Not threatening, not yet, but cautious, always cautious. 5 years alone in these mountains had taught him that. She grabbed the blanket, clutched it to her chest with shaking hands. Last defense. Last dignity. Words tumbled from her mouth. Apache first, then Spanish, then broken English. Don't, don't take it. Please. It's all I have left. She didn't mean the blanket, and Jacob knew it. She meant herself. The last piece of personhood not stolen yet. Jacob Stone had lived 5 years as a ghost. 5 years avoiding all human contact except the occasional supply run to distant trading posts. Only Samuel, an old trapper from Montana, knew where to find him and respected his solitude enough to never visit. 5 years punishing himself for Rebecca and Lily's deaths, for the role he'd played in the massacre at Sand Creek, for every choice that had led to that November morning when he came home to find his cabin burned and his family butchered. Every instinct screamed at him now. Walk away. Don't get involved. Involvement means caring. Caring means pain. Pain means the unbearable weight of failing again. But he saw her eyes, those amber-flecked eyes, full of defiance despite terror. And he thought about Rebecca, about Lily, about Blue Heron, the Apache healer who'd taught him so much before the war came and destroyed everything. If I walk away now, he realized, I'm no better than the men who killed my family. He lowered his rifle, carefully, slowly, every movement deliberate and non-threatening. Then he did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He removed his bearskin cloak and approached her. She flinched, tried to scramble back, but there was nowhere to go and no strength left to get there. He knelt 6 feet away and laid the cloak on the ground between them. A bridge, an offering. Ain't nobody taking nothing from you, miss. His voice was rough from disuse, each word scraping out like rusted metal. Not while there's breath in me. She stared at him, disbelieving, waiting for the trick, waiting for the trap, because there was always a trick, always a trap. He pushed the cloak closer. It's cold. You're hurt. Let me help. One word emerged from her cracked lips. Because it's right. The words came slowly, painfully, like confessing a sin, and I ain't done right in a long damn time. She reached for the cloak. Her fingers touched the fur. Warmth, softness, safety. Real things in a world that had offered only pain. Then consciousness fled. Her eyes rolled back and she collapsed forward. Jacob caught her before she hit the ground. For the first time in 5 years, he was responsible for another human life, and he wasn't sure if that terrified or relieved him. Maybe both. He carried her to his cabin, built into the mountainside where ponderosa gave way to spruce. She weighed almost nothing, just bones and will wrapped in torn buckskin. He kicked open the door and laid her on his cot, piling wool blankets and his bearskin over her shaking body. The cabin was small, maybe 15 by 20 feet, but meticulously organized. Stone fireplace with fire already burning. Timber walls chinked with mud and moss. Pelts covering every surface for warmth. Herbs hanging from rafters, sage and yarrow and juniper. Scents that reminded him of Blue Heron and everything he'd learned from her people before he betrayed them. He examined her injuries with the clinical efficiency of an old soldier who'd doctored too many wounds. Feet torn from running barefoot through mountains. Rope burns around wrists, deep enough to scar. Bruises on her face, ribs, arms. Hypothermia settling into her core. He worked through the morning, cleaned her feet with boiled water, bandaged them with strips of cloth he'd boiled until sterile, wrapped her in every blanket he owned, fed the fire until the cabin was almost uncomfortably warm, made willow bark tea for when she woke, if she woke. Then he sat across the room and waited, whittling a piece of cedar, hands moving automatically through a task they'd performed 10,000 times, while his mind churned through questions. Who was she running from? What had she done? And why did God or fate or whatever cruel force govern this world keep putting broken women in his path when he had no idea how to fix anything? She woke near noon, bolting upright with a cab, hands clutching for weapons that weren't there. Her eyes were wild, unfocused, still seeing whatever horrors had chased her through the night. Jacob didn't move, just spoke quietly from across the room. Water's on the stool beside you. Drink slow. You're dehydrated. She grabbed the tin cup with shaking hands, sniffed it first, checking for poison or drugs or whatever other betrayal experience had taught her to expect. Just water, clean and cold from the mountain spring that fed his cabin. She drank like someone who'd wandered the desert, long, desperate pulls until the cup was empty. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, abraded from screaming or smoke or both. "My cabin, Timber Ridge, 10 miles from any settlement." "Why did you bring me here?" "Because you were dying." He finally turned to look at her, blue eyes meeting dark. "Seemed poor form to let that happen. You're white, observant. White men don't help Apache. This one does." He returned to whittling. "You're welcome to leave whenever you want, but I'd recommend waiting till your feet heal, until whoever's chasing you gives up looking." She tensed, pulling the blanket tighter. "How did you know someone's chasing me?" "Blood trail, rope burns, terror in your eyes. Don't take a shout to figure you're running from something bad." Silence stretched between them. She studied him, the weathered face, the scars on his hands, the way he held himself, coiled and ready, even while performing a simple task. Dangerous, but not to her, at least not right now. "I killed 2 men," she said, and watched for his reaction. He didn't stop whittling. "They deserve it? They tried to rape me after my husband sold me to pay gambling debts. Then they got what was coming." She blinked. No judgment, no condemnation, just acceptance. "White man's law won't see it that way. White man's law is written by white men who ain't never been where you been." He finally set down his knife in the half-carved wood. "You defending yourself ain't murder. Anyone says different, they can take it up with me." Something broke inside her then. Not breaking like shattering. Breaking like a dam giving way. Silent tears streamed down her face, the first she'd allowed herself since her mother died 4 years ago. Jacob handed her a cloth, soft rabbit hide he'd been saving for winter gloves. Said nothing. Just let her cry. Because sometimes that's what healing looks like. Not pretty words or false comfort, just space to be human. When her tears finally slowed, she wiped her face and looked at him with something approaching curiosity rather than fear. "You have an Apache dream catcher above your bed." Jacob's jaw tightened. He'd hoped she wouldn't notice that. "Made it. Learned from a woman named Blue Heron. Mescalero healer." Kaya's breath caught. "Blue Heron was my mother." The words hung in the air like smoke. Jacob stared at this woman, this survivor, this daughter of the person who'd taught him to see Apache people as human beings rather than obstacles to civilization. "Your mother," he said slowly, "was killed at Red Canyon. Cavalry raid. 64. You knew?" "I heard. Later. I'm sorry." Her eyes narrowed, sharpening from grief to suspicion in a heartbeat. "Were you there?" "No, but I scouted for the men who did it. Different raid, but same campaign." The confession came out flat and dead. "I got blood on my hands from that war. Can't wash it off." She should hate him, she knew that. He'd just admitted complicity in the genocide of her people. But something in his voice, in the way he held himself like a man carrying the weight of mountains, told her he hated himself more than she ever could. "Then we're both haunted," she whispered. "Yeah, I reckon we are." Night fell. Jacob made venison stew with wild onions, cornbread that was more corn than bread, and bitter coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since before the war. He offered her food and she hesitated, old survival instincts screaming that it might be poisoned or drugged. He ate first, from the same pot, same spoon, proof of safety. She ate then, ravenously, the first real meal in longer than she could remember. Fletcher had fed her scraps when he remembered to feed her at all. This was actual food, hot and filling, and offered without price or expectation. They didn't speak much. Apache comfort with silence met Mountain Man's preference for it. But the silence wasn't awkward. It was the silence of 2 damaged people recognizing damage in each other and choosing not to probe the wounds. Later, as she drifted toward that sleep in the cot that smelled of pine and safety, she heard him moving around the cabin, cleaning his rifle, checking ammunition, preparing for something. "What are you doing?" she asked, half asleep already. "Getting ready." "For what?" "For when they come looking for you." Her eyes snapped open. "How do you know they'll come?" "Because they always do, and because you're worth more to them alive than dead. They'll come." She should run. should leave now in darkness and spare this strange broken man the violence that followed her like a shadow. But her body wouldn't move. Exhaustion and injury had built a prison more effective than any chains. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for bringing trouble to your door." "Trouble's the only visitor I get anymore." He set his rifle by the door within easy reach. "Might as well make it welcome." She fell asleep wondering if the ghost of Timber Ridge was her doom or her salvation. Time would tell. It always did. Morning came cold and clear. Kaya woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Jacob moving efficiently through some task outside. She stood slowly, testing her bandaged feet. They hurt, but held weight. Progress. Through the window, she saw him checking snares, skinning a rabbit he'd caught, hanging herbs to dry, moving through routines worn smooth by repetition and solitude. She stepped outside. The mountain air was knife-sharp and clean, nothing like the stale air of Fletcher's shack or the suffocating fear of Grant's trading post. Jacob noticed her but didn't stop working. "Coffee's hot if you want it." "Thank you." She poured a cup, grimacing at the bitterness. "You live up here alone?" "5 years now." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, hands continuing to work the rabbit pelt. "Ain't fit for civilized company anymore." "You seem civilized to me." "That's because you don't know what I'd done." She sat on the porch step, warming her hands on the tin cup. "Maybe we're both ghosts then. I've done things too." He finally looked at her. Really looked. Saw past the bruises and feared a something harder underneath. Apache steel wrapped in torn buckskin. "What's your name?" "Your real name, not whatever your husband called you." "Kaya. Kaya Blackwater. My Apache name is just Kaya." "Jacob Stone." He offered his hand. She shook it, surprised by the gentleness in a grip that could crush stone. "Thank you, Jacob Stone, for not being like other white men." "Don't thank me yet. We ain't out of this." He was right. That afternoon, he found tracks in the window below the cabin. 2 days old but fresh enough. Deer had scattered from the valley, spooked by something that wasn't their natural predator. Raven calls from the wrong direction, the pattern all wrong. Someone was searching, getting close. He didn't tell Kaya yet. No need to scare her, but he checked his rifle again, counted ammunition, and prepared for war. The next morning, he made a decision. "Can you shoot?" She looked up from the cornbread he'd taught her to make. "Bow, yes. Rifle, no. My husband never let me touch his guns." "That ends today." He brought out a Spencer repeater, lever action, 7 shots before reload. Showed her loading, aiming, breath control, trigger squeeze, the mechanics of turning fear into precision. She was a natural. Apache hand-eye coordination plus desperate motivation equaled quick learning. First shot missed the tree by 2 feet. 5th shot hit the knothole at 40 yards. Jacob whistled low. "Damn. You're better than most soldiers I trained." She smiled, first genuine smile in 3 years. "My mother said I had shooter's eyes." Blessed by dawn. Something warm flickered in Jacob's chest. Pride maybe, or hope. He wasn't sure, but it felt good and he'd forgotten what good felt like. The good feeling lasted until noon, when Boone Fletcher kicked in the cabin door. No knock, no warning, just violence. Fletcher filled the doorway, red-eyed and snarling, drunk at midday. Behind him, 2 men from town. Gambling buddies looking for quick money now that Fletcher had convinced them his runaway property was worth catching. "There you are, you bitch." Fletcher's words slurred together, rage and alcohol mixing into poison. "You think you can run? You're my wife, my property." He lunged across the cabin and grabbed Kaya by her hair, yanking hard enough to make her cry out. She'd been braiding it, Apache style, and his fist tangled in the black strands. He dragged her toward the door. Her feet slipped on the floor. The blanket she'd wrapped around herself fell away. Jacob had been outside chopping wood. He heard the commotion and stormed back in, axe forgotten, hand going straight to the Colt at his hip. He saw Fletcher dragging Kaya, saw her feet sliding, her hands trying to pry his grip from her hair, saw the terror and rage in her eyes. Something ancient and violent erupted inside Jacob Stone. Something that had been sleeping for 5 years woke up hungry. "Let her go." His voice was quiet, deadly quiet, the voice of a man who'd killed before and would again without hesitation. Fletcher laughed, spittle flying. Or what, old man? She's mine by law. I got the marriage paper right here. That paper's worth the shit I wipe with. Jacob's hand rested on his Colt, thumb ready to pull back the hammer. You got 3 seconds to release her. You gonna shoot me over a squaw mountain man? 1. Fletcher's buddies nervously touched their own guns, suddenly realizing this wasn't going to be the easy money they'd imagined. 2. Kaya stopped struggling, went utterly still, watched Jacob's face, saw something there that Fletcher, in his drunken fury, couldn't see. Absolute commitment. This man would kill for her, had maybe been waiting 5 years for a reason to kill again. Fletcher shoved Kaya away hard, sending her crashing into the wall, and went for his pistol. Big mistake. Jacob drew in one fluid motion, muscle memory from 1,000 drills, from 100 firefights, from the war that had taught him how to turn men into corpses. The Colt barked once. Fletcher's gun hand exploded. The bullet punched through his palm, shattered bone, and exited in a spray of blood and gunpowder. His pistol clattered to the floor. He screamed, clutching the ruin, blood pumping between his fingers. The 2 buddies froze, hands up. We don't want trouble, mister. We're going right now. Jacob's gun swiveled to them. Then get out, take him with you, and tell whoever's listening. She's under my protection now. Next man crosses this threshold dies slower. They dragged Fletcher out, his screams fading down the mountain like a wounded animal's. Silence rushed in. Gun smoke drifted. Jacob holstered his Colt and turned to Kaya. She stood against the wall, trembling, staring at him with something between awe and fear. You all right? He asked. She nodded, couldn't speak yet. He'll be back, Jacob said, matter of fact. With more men. With law, maybe. We need to prepare. Finally, she found her voice. Why? Why do you protect me? You don't know me. I'm nothing to your world. He turned, eyes blazing with something fierce and painful. You ain't nothing. Don't ever say that. You're a woman who survived hell. You're Blue Heron's daughter, and you're under my roof. He paused, voice softening. Besides, I spent 5 years wishing I could save someone. Couldn't save Rebecca. Couldn't save Lily. But maybe I can save you. His voice broke on the last word, and Kaya understood then. This wasn't really about her. This was about his ghosts, his need for redemption, his desperate attempt to balance scales that could never be balanced. But that was okay. She needed a protector. He needed someone to protect. For now, that was enough. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Jacob taught her to reload the Spencer faster, showed her defensive positions around the cabin, explained sight lines and cover, and how to make every shot count when outnumbered. She taught him Apache words he'd forgotten, corrected his pronunciation until he could say thank you properly, told him about her mother, about growing up between 2 worlds, about the day the cavalry came and everything ended. They were building something. Not quite friendship yet, but maybe the foundation for it. That night, as darkness claimed the valley, a rider approached under white flag. Jacob recognized the silhouette before the man dismounted. Military bearing, cavalry hat, Lieutenant Henry Warren. Jacob stepped onto the porch, rifle ready but not aimed. Henry, long way from the fort. Warren dismounted slowly, hands visible. Jacob, I need to talk. It's urgent. About her? About everything. Inside, Kaya hid in the back corner, rifle in hand, ready. Jacob had taught her well. Always be ready. Warren removed his hat. He looked older than his 29 years. War and conscience age a man faster than time. Silas Grants filed official charges. Murder, 2 counts, theft of property, escape from lawful custody. Jacob's voice was stone. She defended herself from rape. I believe you, but Grant's got the sheriff in his pocket, and he's calling in favors with Colonel Hastings at the fort. They're sending a platoon, 20 men, at dawn. Kaya emerged from the shadows. To arrest me? Warren finally met her eyes, looked away quickly. To bring you back, dead or alive, Grant doesn't care which. Jacob's hand drifted to his Colt. Then they'll have to come through me. Jacob, you can't fight the army. You were the army. You know how this ends. I know I ain't letting her hang for defending herself. Warren stood, conflict tearing at him visibly. I owe you my life, Glorietta Pass. That Reb sharpshooter had me pinned. You pulled me out of the line of fire, took a bullet meant for me. I'd be dead if not for you. So? So I'm here to warn you, unofficially, you have 12 hours. Run, north. There's Ute camps. They'll hide you. Or west to the Uncompahgre Plateau. Just don't be here at dawn. Kaya's voice was quiet but steel hard. I'm tired of running. Warren looked at her finally. Really looked. Saw the bruises, the bandaged feet, the eyes that had seen too much. Then you'll die tired, miss. After Warren left, Jacob and Kaya sat by the fire. Long silence. Comfortable silence. Then Kaya spoke. He's right. We should run. No. Jacob. I ran from Fletcher. I ran from Grant. I ran from the fort. I'm done running. She met his eyes. You taught me to shoot. Taught me to fight. Now teach me to stand. They'll outnumber us 10-1. Then we make those odds costly. She touched the Spencer rifle. You said I have shooter's eyes. Let me use them. Jacob saw Rebecca in her face, that same fierce defiance, that same refusal to be broken. He'd failed Rebecca, let her die alone and afraid while he was off scouting for men who massacred children. Not this time. All right, he said. Then we dig in, make them pay for every inch. She nodded once. How do we start? Same way Apache have fought for centuries. We make the land our ally. They work through the night. Jacob's mountain man tactics married to Kaya's Apache knowledge created something formidable. Tripwires made from sinew, attached to deadfall logs that would crush anyone triggering them. False trails marked with broken branches, leading to shallow pits lined with sharpened stakes. High ground positions with pre-cached ammunition and clear sight lines. 3 different escape routes, marked with cairns only they would recognize. And under the cabin floorboards, black powder kegs with a fuse leading 100 yards away. If they were overrun, they'd deny the army even the shelter of walls. As false dawn lightened the eastern peaks, they finished. The mountain was ready. The trap was set. Jacob handed Kaya the Spencer, freshly oiled. You remember, breathe, squeeze, don't jerk the trigger. I remember. If it goes bad, you run north. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. No. Kaya, we stand together or we don't stand at all. Her eyes were hard as obsidian. You don't get to save me, then die. That's not how this works. He almost smiled. You're stubborn. I'm Apache. Same thing. They took positions. Jacob on the high ridge with his Sharps rifle, 300-yard sightline. Kaya at midpoint, 100 yards. Good cover behind granite boulders. And they waited. Dawn broke. Golden light spilled across the San Juan peaks, painting snow orange and red. Beautiful. Peaceful. The calm before slaughter. Then movement in the valley below. Not 20 soldiers. 40. Grant had convinced the colonel to double the force. Jacob's jaw clenched. Kaya's hands tightened on her rifle until knuckles went white. A voice boomed up from the valley, amplified by speaking trumpet. Jacob Stone, Kaya Blackwater. You're surrounded by the United States Army. Surrender immediately or face lethal force. Jacob looked at Kaya across the distance. She looked back. No words needed. They'd chosen their hill. Now they'd hold it or die trying. Jacob chambered around in his Sharps. The metallic sound was loud in the morning stillness. Kaya's finger found the trigger guard on her Spencer. 40 soldiers began their advance up the mountain, and the ghosts of Timber Ridge prepared to become legends. The morning sun painted the valley in shades of blood and gold as Captain Vernon Creel studied the mountain through his field glasses. 52 years old, face weathered by 15 years of frontier warfare, eyes that had watched too many Apache villages burn. He'd earned his captaincy through brutality disguised as duty, and he wore his reputation like armor. Behind him, 40 cavalry soldiers waited in formation, a mix of veterans who'd fought at Glorietta Pass and green recruits who thought frontier duty would be an adventure. They were about to learn different. At the rear, staying carefully behind the soldiers, Silas Grant sat his horse with the nervous tension of a man who preferred ordering violence to witnessing it. His fine suit was already dusty from the ride, his educated Boston accent sounding absurdly civilized in this wilderness. Creel lowered the glasses and turned to his second in command. Sergeant Polk, 28 years old, ambitious and cruel in equal measure. The kind of soldier who volunteered for the dirtiest assignments because he enjoyed them. Two fugitives, Creel said, voice dripping contempt. A deserter and a squaw. This should be finished by breakfast. Polk grinned. Want me to take points, sir? I volunteered for the bounty on the woman. You'll get your bounty when she's in chains. Not before. I want this done clean. No embarrassments. What Creel didn't know, what his 15 years of conventional warfare hadn't taught him, was that mountain fighting followed different rules. Rules written in Apache blood and mountain man survival. Rules that favored the defender over the attacker, the desperate over the confident, the ghosts over the living. He was about to get an education. Creel split his force with textbook precision. 10 cavalry soldiers mounted, sweeping forward to surround the cabin. 10 more on foot, moving through the trees on the western flank. Another 10 approaching from the east. The remaining 10 held in reserve with the wounded and supplies. It was exactly what Jacob expected. Conventional tactics. Predictable. Fatal. The lead element advanced confidently. Sergeant Polk rode at the front, already counting the bounty money in his head. His horse, a big bay gelding, picked its way up the trail with careful steps. The first tripwire was invisible. Sinew stretched ankle-high across the path, covered with pine needles and morning frost. The bay's hoof caught it. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then physics and leverage took over. The counterweight released. A massive ponderosa log, 12 feet long and 400 pounds of mountain-grown timber, swung down from the ridge like the fist of an angry god. The sound was apocalyptic, wood striking flesh and bone with enough force to pulverize. 3 horses went down instantly, skulls crushed, riders thrown like ragdolls. Polk's mount reared in terror, throwing him hard. He hit the ground, and his shoulders separated with a wet pop. 2 soldiers lay motionless, legs shattered under the weight of dying horses. One soldier was impaled on a broken branch, screaming in a way that would haunt the survivor's dreams. Chaos erupted. Horses screaming, that high-pitched sound that's almost human. Men shouting, the careful formation dissolving into panic. And from the high ridge 300 yards away, Jacob's Sharp's rifle spoke. The crack echoed through the valley like thunder. Polk's hat flew off. He felt the wind of the bullet's passage, close enough to kiss his scalp. An inch lower, and his brains would have painted the rocks. The message was clear. I can kill you whenever I choose. This is mercy. The soldiers scattered, diving for cover, firing blind into the trees, wasting ammunition on shadows and fear. Jacob was already moving. Old mountain man tactic: shoot and relocate. Never stay where you fired from. He covered 50 yards in seconds, found new cover behind a granite outcrop, chambered another round. In the valley, Grant's horse danced nervously. The trader's face had gone pale. What the hell was that? Creel's jaw was clenched so tight his teeth ground audibly. Traps. The bastard rigged traps. He wheeled his horse, screaming at his scattered men. Reform! Return fire! Find that shooter! But they were shooting at ghosts. Jacob had vanished into the mountain he had called home for 5 years. And on the eastern flank, another nightmare was about to begin. Lieutenant David Shaw led Team Bravo through the Ponderosa Forest, 24 years old, fresh from West Point, with a head full of military theory and a heart full of idealism. This was his first real combat command, his first test. It would also be his education in how Apache warriors had survived centuries against superior numbers. His 15 men moved in a textbook skirmish line, weapons ready, eyes scanning. One private, barely 19 with a Nebraska farm boy's face, whispered nervously, "Sir, this don't feel right. Too quiet." Shaw opened his mouth to respond with something reassuring. The arrow through the private's throat cut off both their words. Silent, sudden, absolutely fatal. The boy collapsed, while hands clutching at the shaft, blood pumping between his fingers. His eyes were weighed with shock and the terrible understanding that he would die here, far from the Nebraska farm he'd left to seek adventure. Panic rippled through the line like electricity. Kaya was 60 yards away, hidden in pine boughs, wearing the earth-toned buckskin that made her invisible against bark and shadow. She'd learned this from her mother. Apache warriors win not by strength but by invisibility, by becoming part of the mountain itself. Her second arrow took a corporal in the shoulder, non-fatal but devastating. He went down screaming, rifle forgotten, both hands trying to pull the shaft free. Shaw's voice cracked as he tried to maintain control. "There, in the trees, open fire!" 20 rifles erupted. Bullets shredded branches, bark exploded in clouds of wood chips. Pine needles rained down like green snow. The sound was deafening, the violence overwhelming. But Kaya was already gone. Moved 30 yards left, silent as morning mist. Her third arrow clipped a sergeant's ear. Barely a wound, but the sight of his own blood running down his neck broke something in him. He fired wildly, screaming, hitting nothing. Shaw screamed for ceasefire, but discipline was fracturing. These weren't hardened Indian fighters. They were boys playing soldier, and the game had just turned deadly real. A young private, maybe 19, red hair and freckles, broke from the line, saw movement, charged alone, trying to prove courage to men who weren't watching. Kaya waited behind a thick oak. Her obsidian knife was in her hand, the blade her mother had given her, the one she'd carried for 4 years through slavery and survival. He rounded the tree, rifle raised, and she was there, 5 feet away, close enough to see the terror bloom in his green eyes. For one heartbeat, she hesitated. He's just a boy. Like she was just a girl when Dakota sold her. Someone's son, someone's brother, but he raised his rifle and survival is faster than sympathy. Her knife struck under his ribs, angled upward toward the heart. Apache killing technique, learned from warriors, refined by necessity. Quick, mostly merciful. He gasped, dropped his rifle, looked down at the blade in his chest with almost childlike confusion. "I'm sorry," she whispered in Apache. "Shikai." He collapsed. Life fled his eyes like water running through fingers. She pulled the knife free and stared at her hands, now truly bloodstained. Defender or murderer? The line blurred in smoke and necessity. On the high ridge, Jacob continued his deadly work. 3 more shots, 3 more messages written in lead and gunpowder. Shot 1, a soldier's canteen at 350 yards. Water exploded in a spray that looked like blood in the morning light. The soldier was unharmed, but his nerve broke. He ran, abandoning his position, his duty, his courage. Shot 2, Captain Creel's horse. Jacob aimed for the animal, not the rider. There were lines even necessity couldn't make him cross. The horse went down with a scream, throwing Creel hard. The captain hit rocks and felt ribs crack. Shot 3, the telescope Creel had been using to direct his men. Jacob's bullet shattered the brass tube while it was pressed to Creel's eye. Glass shards cut the captain's face, partially blinding him. Blood ran into his remaining eye, turning the world red. Creel screamed orders through the pain and chaos, but his men were breaking. This wasn't warfare. This was being hunted. Every shadow held death. Shadow. Every silence screamed threat. Men who'd faced down Comanche and Sioux were shaking because this was different. This was personal. By mid-morning, Creel's 40-man force was in shambles. 7 dead from the deadfall trap, 4 more wounded critically, 3 casualties from Kaya's arrows. Morale shattered, ammunition wasted on fear and phantom targets. The captain made the decision born of desperation and pride. Fall back to the valley, regroup with the reserves. Sergeant Polk, arm in a sling, his shoulder still screaming agony with every breath, limped beside his commander. "Sir, we're losing this fight." "We're not losing anything, Sergeant. We're adjusting tactics." But they both knew the truth. 2 people, 1 mountain man and 1 Apache woman, were defeating 40 United States Army soldiers. In the valley camp, the scene was chaos barely contained. Wounded soldiers lay on blankets, moaning. The doctor, an old contract surgeon who'd seen too many wars, moved between them with the tired efficiency of a man who knew he couldn't save them all. Silas Grant paced near his tent, his fine suit now torn and dusty, his civilized veneer cracking. He grabbed Creel as the captain stumbled into camp. "This is insane. 10 men dead over 1 squaw? Cut your losses, burn the mountain and leave." Creel's ruined face was a mask of blood and fury. "I don't abandon missions." "This isn't a mission, it's a massacre. You're down to 30 effective soldiers against 2 ghosts, who know this terrain like their own heartbeat. They're not ghosts, they're flesh and blood. They bleed and die like anyone else. Your men are bleeding plenty. How much are you willing to pay for your pride? It was the wrong question to ask a man like Vernon Creel. Pride was all he had left. His reputation was built on brutality and winning. Losing to a deserter and a savage would destroy everything he'd spent 15 years building. We take the fight to them, on our terms, with everything we have. He turned to what remained of his command. Bring up the howitzer. The 12-pound mountain howitzer had been dragged up from Fort Garland for exactly this scenario. Artillery against fortifications. Canister shot that would turn flesh to pulp and bone to powder. Lieutenant Shaw, his idealism bleeding out with every dead boy he'd watched fall, stepped forward. Sir, that's excessive force. There are probably civilians in that area. They're hostiles, Lieutenant. That's war. They're two people defending themselves. Creel's remaining eye focused on Shaw with laser intensity. Are you refusing an order? Shaw swallowed hard. His whole life he'd been taught that orders were sacred. That discipline was the foundation of military service. But standing here looking at boys who died for a corrupt traitor's revenge, something broke in him. I'm questioning the legality and morality of this order, sir. Noted and overruled. Sergeant Polk, prepare the howitzer. Load canister shot. Target the ridge where the shooter's been operating. As darkness fell, the exhausted soldiers made camp. But the mountain held more dangers than they knew. That night, while they slept, Apache scouts moved through their positions like smoke. By dawn, the balance of power had shifted once more. Dawn came cold and brutal. Captain Creel, desperate after yesterday's losses, made a decision born of desperation and pride and the terrible fear that his career was ending in this godforsaken valley. Artillery, target the canyon entrance. Canister shot, maximum charge. Lieutenant Shaw stepped forward. Sir, you'll kill civilians. They're hostiles. That's war. That's murder. Creel's ruined face twisted. You're relieved of duty, Lieutenant. Confine yourself to the supply wagon. No, sir. That's insubordination. That's conscience. Something you sold years ago. The howitzer was wheeled forward. The gun crew, good soldiers following bad orders, loaded canister shot. Hundreds of lead balls that would turn the canyon entrance into a killing floor. Creel aimed the gun himself, his one good eye sighting down the barrel. Last chance, surrender or be annihilated. Kaya stepped into view, alone, unarmed, proud. She stood at the canyon entrance, backlit by rising sun, and her voice carried across the valley with Apache projection. I am Kaya Blackwater, daughter of Blue Heron, granddaughter of Two Moons. I survived my husband's fists, the traitor's chains, your soldiers' bullets. You think your cannon frightens me? Creel's finger tightened on the firing lanyard. Bravery won't stop artillery, girl. No, but truth will. She held up papers, high enough for everyone to see. Silas Grant's confession. Naming you captain. Naming Colonel Hastings. 30% of trafficking profits. Every name, every date, every dollar. If you fire that cannon, these papers go to newspapers in Denver, Santa Fe, Washington. Your career ends. Your life ends. Choose carefully. For one frozen moment, the whole valley held its breath. Then a voice from the ranks, a private, young, his voice shaking. Is it true, Captain? You profited from selling women? Creel didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because silence was confession. Another voice, a corporal. My sister was Apache, disappeared 2 years back. Was she one of your prophets? The murmuring grew, anger building like a storm. Lieutenant Shaw pushed through the ranks. Captain Vernon Creel, I'm placing you under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, and abuse of authority. You don't have the authority. I have 50 witnesses, and this confession. And the soldiers, good men who'd been following corrupt orders, lowered their rifles. Some slowly, some quickly. But all of them lowered, and then, deliberately, they pointed them at Creel. The captain looked around at his crumbling command, at the empire he'd built through brutality now collapsing in minutes. You're all making a mistake. No, sir, Shaw said quietly. We're correcting one. Silas Grant tried to run, mounted his horse and spurred for the tree line, willing to abandon everything if it meant survival. Dakota's arrow caught him in the thigh. He fell hard, screaming. Kaya walked to where he lay bleeding, looked down at the man who'd bought and sold human beings like livestock. "Please," he begged. "I have money. I can pay you anything. I'm not for sale anymore." Her knife was quick, merciful even, more mercy than he'd ever shown anyone. The siege of Timber Ridge ended not with artillery, but with revelation, with truth spoken loud enough that lies couldn't drown it out. 3 days later, the trials began. Lieutenant Shaw, now acting commander with Creel and Chains, conducted field tribunals. Newspaper reporters attended, summoned by messages Warren had sent before the final battle. Silas Grant's posthumous crimes were read into record. His confession damned not just him, but a network of corruption stretching from Fort Garland to Denver. Captain Creel was stripped of rank and command, court-martial pending. The charges read like a catalog of frontier evil: trafficking, conspiracy, extortion, accessory to rape and murder. Colonel Hastings, safe at Fort Garland, received a telegram ordering him to Denver to face investigation. His career was finished. Prison waited. Pike Brennan testified for 5 hours, named names, described operations, bought his own survival with other men's secrets. And Kaya testified. She stood before the assembled soldiers and reporters, wearing clean buckskin that Apache women had made for her, hair braided in the traditional style, and spoke her truth. She described being sold by her cousin, being bought by Fletcher, 3 years of abuse, being sold again to Grant, fighting back, running, finding Jacob Stone. Her voice never wavered, never broke, clear and strong and absolutely damning. The reporters wrote furiously. This was the story that would define their careers. "Indian woman exposes trafficking ring," screamed the Denver Post. "Army corruption scandal in Colorado," declared the Santa Fe Gazette. The Apache who wouldn't be silenced ran Harper's Weekly, with a sketch of Kaya standing defiant at the canyon entrance. She became a symbol, proof that indigenous peoples weren't savages, but humans fighting for survival against systematic brutality. The Apache camp had transformed in those 3 days. What started as a hiding place for 40 dying people became a permanent settlement. Two Hearts Village, Kaya named it, honoring both her Apache and Mexican heritage, honoring the duality that had once made her an outcast, but now made her a bridge. Not purely Apache, open to anyone who needed sanctuary. Apache families from broken reservations, Mexican refugees fleeing violence across the border, mixed blood children abandoned by both cultures, white allies like Jacob, Shaw, and Thomas Littlefoot who chose conscience over comfort. Within a week, 60 people. Within a month, over 100. They built shelters mixing wickiups and log cabins, cultural fusion made visible in architecture. They planted gardens with Apache Three Sisters method alongside European wheat. They established a school where children learned 3 languages and 2 histories, the one written by victors and the one remembered by survivors. Dakota became war chief, responsible for defense and external relations. Kaya became peace chief, handling internal governance and diplomacy. Jacob refused any official title, but everyone knew him as the Gray Ghost, the protector who'd started it all. Lieutenant Shaw resigned his commission. Couldn't wear the uniform anymore, not after seeing what it had been used to justify him. He became the village liaison to white authorities, using his military knowledge and West Point education to navigate the bureaucracy that wanted to destroy what they'd built. Thomas Littlefoot stayed too, found purpose in teaching, tracking, and wilderness survival. Found family and people who understood what it meant to live between worlds. 1 month after the siege, Jacob stood on the hillside overlooking Two Hearts Village, watching smoke rise from cook fires, listening to children laugh, seeing people who'd been broken, finding ways to be whole again. He felt Rebecca's presence. Not the screaming horror of her death, but the quiet joy of her life. And Lily, forever 7 years old, playing in heaven with other children stolen too soon. "I think you'd approve," he whispered to ghosts who finally felt at peace. Kaya approached silently. She'd learned his ways, knew when he needed company and when he needed solitude. This moment, she judged, could use both. "You did it," he said without turning. "Built something real. We did it. You provided the covering fire that made everything else possible." This is yours. I just helped at the start. She touched his arm gently. Thank you for saving me, for teaching me, for being the father I lost. His eyes shone with moisture that might have been tears or might have been mountain wind. You gave me a reason to stop dying, made me feel like maybe I earned forgiveness. Rebecca and Lily would be proud. I hope so. He gazed toward the high peaks, toward the solitude that had been his prison and his penance. I'm leaving. Her heart sank. What? Why, mice? Because you don't need me anymore. Village is safe. You're strong, and I belong up there in the high country, always have. Jacob, I'll visit. I promise, but this place, all these people, all this life, it reminds me too much of what I lost. And I'm not sure I can carry that weight and their hope at the same time. She understood. Some wounds need solitude to heal properly. Go then, but remember, you always have a home here. He nodded once, mounted his horse, a paint gelding he'd traded for. Rode toward the peaks that had sheltered him for 5 years. Kaya watched until he was just a speck against snow and skyline. That afternoon, a wagon arrived. A woman driving, 2 children beside her, white woman in her 30s, traveling alone, exhausted, desperate. Kaya met her at the village edge. Can I help you? The woman's voice shook. I heard there's a place where people like me, people who don't fit anywhere else, might find home. What happened? My husband was Comanche. Bounty hunters killed him 3 months ago. My children are half-blood. Nobody will take us. Towns chase us out. Reservations won't accept us. We have nowhere. Tears streamed down her weathered face. Please, we're so tired of running. Kaya took her hand, calloused palm meeting calloused palm. You're safe now, you're home. She led them into the village, introduced them to families who understood, found them a shelter, fed them, gave them the first safety they'd known in months. And Kaya realized this was what Chief White Eagle had meant in his final words. This was the bridge between worlds. This was how cultures didn't just survive, but evolved. That evening, she stood on her hillside, watching sunset paint the mountains in shades of amber and gold, the same amber as the flecks in her eyes that her mother had called blessed by dawn. Dakota joined her. You did well today. Another family saved. I did what my mother would have done. You did better. She healed bodies. You heal communities. Silence fell, comfortable and earned. Do you still regret it, she asked, selling me to Fletcher? He was quiet for a long time. Every day, every single day. But maybe it had to happen. Maybe you had to go through hell so you could build heaven for others. That's convenient logic. Doesn't make it wrong. She considered his words. Maybe he was right. Maybe all the pain had forged her into who she needed to be. Or maybe she was just rationalizing trauma. Probably both. Dakota? Yes, cousin? Thank you for coming back, for fighting beside me, for believing I was worth redemption. He turned to face her fully. You were never the one who needed redeeming, Nayland. That was always me. They stood together as darkness claimed the valley. Below them, Two Hearts Village glowed with firelight. Children played. Adults cooked. Community thrived. The future being built from the ruins of the past. Far above, in the high peaks where snow never melted, a lone figure made camp. Jacob Stone, the gray ghost of Timber Ridge, still haunted but no longer lost. He'd saved someone. And in saving her, he'd saved himself. The circle wasn't complete. Circles never are. But it was healing slowly, like spring comes to mountains. Inevitable and patient and absolutely unstoppable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more refugees, more threats, more reasons to fight. But tonight, for the first time in years, Kaya Blackwater slept without nightmares. And that was victory enough. The mountain dawn carried more than cold wind. It carried voices. Apache voices singing the death song, that haunting melody that marks the boundary between this world and the next. Kaya heard it 3 weeks after the siege ended, while leading a small group north to scout new territory for the growing village. She stopped so suddenly that Dakota nearly walked into her. What is it? Listen, my people, they're singing for the dead. The sound came from a hidden canyon 2 miles northeast. As they approached, the smell hit first. Sickness, death, the sweet rot of bodies that had lain too long in autumn warmth. They found 40 Apache, Mescalero, from the same band that had rejected Kaya years ago. But these weren't warriors or hunters. These were the ones left behind: women, children, elders, the vulnerable ones who couldn't run fast enough when the army came. Bodies wrapped in blankets, prepared for burial. 12 already dead, 20 more showing the unmistakable signs of smallpox, fever, pustules covering skin, delirium, the white man's disease, brought deliberately or negligently on contaminated army blankets, now reaping its harvest. An old woman, face ravaged by the pox, spat when she saw Kaya. Half-blood, you bring the white ghost to finish what the blanket started? I bring help. Kaya's voice was steady despite the horror before her. We need no help from traitors. But a younger woman, maybe 25, desperate and exhausted, approached with a child in her arms. The girl was perhaps fit-bone, covered in the telltale rash, burning with fever. Please, if you have medicine, she's all I have left. Kaya took the child without hesitation, felt the heat radiating from small body. We have medicine and knowledge, but you need to let us help. Jacob emerged from the trees behind them. He'd followed when he heard the death songs, old instincts overriding his desire for solitude. He surveyed the camp with a scout's eye and a survivor's knowledge. Smallpox, he said quietly to Kaya. Bad outbreak. You got quarantine set up? An elderly man, clearly the leader, stepped forward. Chief White Eagle, 70 winters old, himself showing early symptoms. We know nothing of white man's diseases. We pray to our gods. We prepare for the spirit world. Praying's fine, Jacob said, but medicine works better. I survived this when I was a boy. I'm immune, I can help. But we need supplies. Water, lots of it. Willow bark, cool compresses. How long? Dakota asked the question everyone was thinking. 3 days minimum to see who lives and who doesn't. Maybe a week to get the survivors strong enough to move. A rider approached from the south. Lieutenant Shaw, now officially discharged, but still wearing pieces of his uniform out of habit. Kaya, we have a problem. Colonel Hastings escaped federal custody 3 days ago during a prison transfer. He's rallied sympathetic officers and militia from Fort Garland and surrounding territories. They're coming here with 50 soldiers and about 60 militia. They'll arrive tomorrow afternoon. Warren's face was grim. We don't have a week. We barely have a day. Kaya looked at the dying children, at the desperate mothers, at the old chief who'd spent his life protecting his people and now watched them perish from invisible enemies. Then we make time. Jacob studied her face, saw the set of her jaw, the steel in her eyes. You're staying. I'm staying. Anyone who wants to leave can go, but I won't abandon them. They'll kill you. Hastings won't show mercy. You embarrass the army, expose corruption. He'll make an example. Then I die with my people, on my feet, fighting. She met his eyes. You taught me that. Don't take it back now. For a long moment, Jacob wrestled with ghosts. Rebecca had died while he was away. Lily had died alone and afraid. Every instinct screamed at him to protect Kaya by dragging her away from this death trap. But she wasn't a child to be protected. She was a leader making a choice. All right, he said finally. Then we fight on 2 fronts, heal the sick, hold off the army. Dakota's laugh was bitter. Impossible. So was yesterday. We managed. They split into teams. Kaya led the healing effort with 5 Apache women who knew traditional medicine. Jacob and Dakota led the defense preparations with Shaw, Thomas Littlefoot, and 15 Apache warriors. The healing work was brutal. Kaya used everything her mother had taught her. Yucca root pounded into soap for sanitation, willow bark tea to reduce fever. Cool water compresses changed every hour to manage the burning. Quarantine protocols to slow the spread. Juniper smoke for purification. More psychological than medical, but morale mattered when death walked among them. Jacob contributed hard-won knowledge. Boiling water to kill contagion. Systematic patient tracking to allocate scarce resources. Rationing medicine to maximize survival rates. They worked 18-hour days. Hands went raw, bodies exhausted. But people lived. Little Eagle, the 5-year-old girl Kaya had taken from her mother that first day, showed symptoms within hours. High fever. The rash spreading across her small body. Kaya stayed with her through the first night, sponging her with cool water, singing Apache lullabies her mother had sung. By morning, the fever broke. The child opened her eyes, clear and focused. "Are you the bridge lady?" Grandfather said the bridge would come. Kaya's tears fell freely. "Yes, little one. I'm the bridge." The child survived. 12 others didn't. They buried them in the traditional mound, facing east toward the rising sun, and Kaya wept for each one. Children she couldn't save. Elders who'd lived too long only to die from white man's plague. Chief White Eagle weakened daily. The smallpox was taking him, old body unable to fight young disease. On the second night, he called Kaya to his side. "Sit, granddaughter." She knelt beside his pallet. "I'm not your granddaughter. You cast me out." "We were fools, afraid. The tribe was dying and we thought purity would save us." His laugh was bitter, liquid. "Purity saved nothing. You saved us. You and your white ghost." Jacob Stone is a good man. He carries heavy ghosts. I see them on his shoulders. But he does right action despite wrong history. That is honor. White Eagle's clouded eyes found hers. "I walked with spirits last night. They showed me vision." "What did you see?" "The white man's world swallowing ours. Our children forgetting the old tongue. The sacred mountains scarred by iron roads." His breathing labored. "But also you, building bridges between the worlds. Our blood, our stories, our strength, surviving through you." "I don't know how." "You already started. Two Hearts Village. Place for the broken to become whole. That is how we survive. Not through purity, but through adaptation." He reached for her hand with fingers that felt like dry twigs. "I name you Peace Chief of the Mescalero. You will lead our people into the new world." "I'm half-blood." "You are whole heart. That is what matters." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Promise me. Build your village. Make it sanctuary for all who are cast out. Be the bridge your mother would be proud of." "I promise." Chief White Eagle died at dawn on the third day. They sang his spirit into the next world with voices that echoed through the canyon. Kaya wept for him, for her mother, for all the stolen years and murdered futures. After the burial, Jacob examined the army blankets that had brought the disease. Years of scouting had taught him to notice details. He turned one over, found a quartermaster tag still stitched inside. "Fort Garland Quartermaster. Distributed under order of Colonel R. Hastings, October 1868. His blood went cold. He showed Kaya. "This wasn't negligence," she said, voice hollow. "This was deliberate." "Biological warfare," Jacob confirmed. Hastings knew these blankets carried smallpox. He distributed them to Apache camps on purpose. Genocide by disease. The evidence changed everything. Hastings wasn't just covering up trafficking. He was covering up mass murder. A war crime that would hang him if exposed. "This is why he's coming," Kaya realized. "Not revenge. He needs to destroy everyone who might have found this evidence." Jacob folded the blanket carefully. "Then we make damn sure this evidence survives, even if we don't." Jacob found her sitting alone after the burial, sat beside her without speaking. Sometimes silence was the only appropriate response to grief. Finally, she asked, "Do you think the dead forgive us for surviving?" "I think they want us to survive, and to make that survival mean something." "White Eagle said you carry ghosts." "I do. Rebecca and Lily. Every person who died because I led soldiers to their camps. Every choice that led to blood." He stared at his scarred hands. "But maybe carrying ghosts means remembering, and remembering means not making the same mistakes. Are we forgiven? I don't know about forgiven, but maybe we're learning how to forgive ourselves." The sound of horses interrupted the moment. Dakota ran into the camp, breathing hard. "They're here. Hastings and his army, setting up in the valley below. More than we thought, maybe 70 soldiers and 80 militia. They've got artillery." Jacob stood, old war instincts taking over. "How long do we have?" "They're making camp now. My guess is they attack at dawn. Give us maybe 12 hours. Kaya rose, grief transforming into determination. "Then we use those 12 hours. The defense preparations were desperate and brilliant. They couldn't fortify the canyon, too open, too many approaches. Instead, they'd create a defensive network using the terrain itself. Shaw, drawing on West Point training, identified choke points and sight lines. Thomas Littlefoot used his scout knowledge to predict approach routes. Dakota contributed Apache guerrilla warfare tactics. Jacob tied it all together with his experience from a dozen frontier battles. They built rock barricades at the canyon entrance, chest high, with firing ports. They cached ammunition every 50 yards along the defense line. They marked 3 separate escape routes with stone cairns visible only to those who knew what to look for. They rigged deadfall traps on the most likely approach paths. They created false defensive positions to draw fire away from real ones. And they prepared for the worst. If overrun, they'd fall back to a secondary position deeper in the canyon. If that fell, they'd scatter into the mountains using different routes. Survival over victory, life over pride. As they worked through the day, Kaya noticed something. The Apache women who'd been tending the sick were now checking weapons. The warriors who'd been building defenses were now teaching the women to shoot. The children old enough to understand were being given tasks, carrying water and ammunition, learning to reload rifles. Everyone was preparing to fight, not because they wanted to, because they had no choice. That night, as darkness claimed the mountains, an unexpected visitor entered their camp. A lone rider, white flag tied to his rifle barrel, calling out in clear English, "I come to talk. I'm alone. Don't shoot." Jacob recognized the voice. His finger relaxed on the trigger. "Let him through." The rider emerged into firelight, army uniform but no weapons visible. Lieutenant Henry Warren, 29 years old, veteran of the Civil War at Glorieta Pass, a man who'd already seen more death than most soldiers twice his age. Jacob Stone, been a long time. "Warren, what brings you to the wrong side of a siege?" Warren dismounted slowly, hands visible. "Conscience, mostly, and the fact that this whole thing stinks worse than a 3-day corpse." "You with Hastings?" "Officially, yes." He pulled together every available soldier and promised militia big bounties. "Unofficially, I think he's insane. Man escaped federal custody, killed 2 guards, and is leading an illegal military action against civilians. That's not duty. That's revenge." Shaw stepping forward. "I know you, Captain. You taught tactics at the point when I was a cadet. You were big on following regulations." "Still am, which is why I'm here. Hastings is operating outside legal authority. His court-martial was pending, but he jumped bail. Any orders he gives are void. Any soldier following them is committing criminal acts." Kaya approached the fire. "Why tell us this?" Warren looked at her, really looked, seeing the bandaged hands from tending the sick, the exhaustion carved into a face too young to carry so much weight. "Because I've spent 10 years following orders, good ones and bad ones, and I'm tired of watching bad orders kill good people. What do you want from us?" "Nothing. I'm giving you information. Hastings has 2 howitzers. He plans to shell this canyon at dawn, whether you surrender or not. He wants everyone dead, no witnesses, no survivors. Then he'll claim you were hostile Indians who attacked first. Can you stop him? I've got maybe 20 soldiers who will listen to me over him. Not enough to stop the assault, but enough to maybe save some lives in the chaos." Jacob extended his hand. "Then we're allies." Warren shook it. "Strange world where doing the right thing makes you a traitor. Strange world where following your conscience is considered treasonous." The captain remounted. "I need to get back before I'm missed. But know this, when the shooting starts, my men will be aiming high. We won't help you, but we won't murder you either." He rode back into darkness, leaving them with knowledge that made everything both better and worse. They had allies inside the enemy camp, but the enemy was coming regardless, and they had artillery. The night passed in fitful rest and constant preparation. Warriors checked weapons, mothers held children. Elders prayed to gods who seemed very far away. Kaya made rounds through the camp, speaking to each family, each fighter, offering words of encouragement that felt hollow in her own mouth, but seemed to matter to those who heard them. She found Jacob on the ridge overlooking the valley, watching enemy campfires like fallen stars. "You should sleep. Tomorrow will be hard. Been through worse." "When?" "Glorieta Pass. We were outnumbered 3-1. Half our ammunition was wet. Colonel thought we were dead for certain. What happened? We won, barely, and it cost us half our men. He turned to face her. But we won because we fought for something that mattered. Tomorrow, we do the same. I'm scared, Jacob. Good. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. He put a hand on her shoulder, paternal and protective. Your mother would be proud of you. I'm proud of you. She leaned against him briefly, drawing strength. If I don't survive tomorrow, tell the children I tried. You'll survive. You're too stubborn to die. I'm Apache. Same thing. Dawn broke cold and clear. The enemy force assembled in the valley below, an overwhelming display of military power. 2 howitzers positioned for bombardment, soldiers in formation, militia spreading out to flank. Colonel Raymond Hastings stood before his assembled force, face twisted with rage and desperation. 52 years old, career destroyed, facing prison or execution, nothing left to lose. His voice carried across the valley. That canyon holds the criminals who destroyed my life, who corrupted my men, who turned soldiers against their own country. Today we erase that stain. Today we show what happens to traitors and savages. No prisoners, no mercy. Advance. The howitzers fired first. The explosions were biblical. Rock and earth erupted. Trees shattered into splinters. The earth itself seemed to scream. But the canyon was empty. Kaya's people had moved to secondary positions overnight, leaving the entrance as a trap. The artillery pounded empty ground while defenders watched from high cover. When the soldiers advanced through the smoke and dust, expecting to find corpses and rubble, they found prepared positions and disciplined fire instead. The battle began in earnest. Jacob Sharp spoke with methodical precision. He wasn't aiming for soldiers, not directly. He targeted sergeants, officers, anyone giving orders. Decapitate the command structure, and formations fall apart. Kaya and the Apache women fired from concealed positions, using terrain and camouflage to become invisible. They picked targets carefully, conserving ammunition, every shot counting. Dakota's warriors used bows alongside rifles, silent death supplementing loud violence. Arrows found gaps in armor, soft spots in formations. Shaw's West Point training showed in the coordinated fallback patterns. When one position became untenable, defenders withdrew to the next prepared position in sequence, never breaking, never panicking. But the sheer weight of numbers was telling. 70 soldiers plus 80 militia against 30 defenders. The math was brutal. Warren and his 20 loyalists did what they could, firing high, moving slowly, creating confusion in the enemy ranks. But it wasn't enough. By mid-morning, the defenders had been pushed back to their final position, a natural amphitheater of stone with only one entrance. Defensible, but also a trap. If they were overrun here, there was nowhere left to run. Hastings, seeing victory within grasp, ordered a final assault. Everyone forward. Overwhelming force. End this now. The militia charged first, brave or foolish or greedy for bounty money. They hit the narrow entrance in a wave of bodies and bullets. Jacob, positioned at the choke point with a Spencer repeater, cut them down with mechanical efficiency. 7 shots, 7 men fell. Reload, 7 more. The entrance became a charnel house, but they kept coming, stepping over their own dead, driven by Hastings' promises and the terrible momentum of violence. Kaya's rifle ran dry. She drew her obsidian knife, prepared to fight hand-to-hand if necessary. Beside her, Dakota notched another arrow. They exchanged a look. This might be the end, but it would be their end on their terms. Then the sound that changed everything. A bugle call from the valley. Not the charge, the recall. Confused, the militia hesitated. Soldiers looked back. The assault faltered. Captain Warren rode into view, pistol in hand, pointing at Hastings. Cease fire. All forces cease fire. That is an order. Hastings wheeled on him. You don't give orders here. I do when you're operating illegally. Warren pulled a document from his coat. Federal warrant for your arrest. You jumped bail. You're a fugitive. Your command authority is void. These men follow me. And these men follow the law. Or they should. Warren addressed the assembled forces. Colonel Hastings is a wanted criminal. Any man who continues following his orders is committing treason. Stand down now and you face no charges. Continue and you hang with him. The effect was electric. Soldiers lowered weapons. The militia, always more interested in money than ideology, backed away from the killing ground. Hastings, seeing his army dissolve, did something desperate and stupid. He grabbed a rifle from a nearby soldier and aimed at Warren. Traitor! Jacob's shot from 300 yards took Hastings in the shoulder. Not lethal, but absolutely decisive. The rifle flew from nerveless fingers. Hastings collapsed, screaming. Warren dismounted calmly. Someone put this fool in irons. And get a doctor. The army doesn't execute criminals without a trial. The Battle of Two Hearts Canyon ended not with a final charge, but with a whimper. Hastings in chains, raving about traitors and savages. The militia dispersing before they could be arrested. The soldiers, ashamed and relieved, lowering weapons they should never have raised. The defenders emerged from their positions slowly, hardly believing the battle was over. No more artillery, no more attacks. Just exhausted people on both sides wanting nothing more than to go home. Kea found Jacob reloading his rifle out of pure habit. It's over. We won. We survived. That's not always the same as winning. Close enough for me. They walked through the aftermath together, counting the Watos, 8 defenders dead, including 2 of the women who'd been tending the sick, 14 wounded, some critically. On the other side, 23 militia dead, 16 soldiers dead, dozens wounded. The arithmetic of violence never balanced. Over the next week, the world changed in small ways. The military tribunal came 5 days later. Charges against Lieutenant David Shaw: mutiny, insubordination, conduct unbecoming an officer. Shaw stood at attention before 3 colonels from Fort Garland. Lieutenant, you arrested your commanding officer in the field. Sir, Captain Creel was operating under corruption charges and issuing illegal orders. I followed regulations requiring— The senior colonel raised his hand. We've reviewed the evidence. Captain Creel will face court-martial for his crimes. However, your actions, while legally justified, have made your continued service complicated. We're offering honorable discharge in lieu of further proceedings. Shaw understood. The Army was protecting itself. He signed the papers without hesitation. That accumulated into something larger. Warren took command of the surviving soldiers and began the long process of sorting out who'd acted under illegal orders versus who'd committed actual crimes. Hastings was transported to Denver in chains, raving and broken. His court-martial would be swift and brutal, prison-weighted, or possibly the gallows. Silas Grant's trafficking network, exposed by his confession and the trials, crumbled. Arrests were made from Fort Garland to Denver. Brothels were raided, victims freed. The corrupt Indian agency system faced its first real reckoning. Shaw was offered reinstatement with full rank. He declined. I can't serve an institution I don't trust anymore, but I can serve people. That's what I'll do here. Thomas Littlefoot brought his mother to Two Hearts Village. She was 60 years old, scarred inside and out, and she wept when she saw the community Kaya had built. A place where being broken doesn't mean being worthless. I never thought I'd live to see it. Captain Warren visited before returning to his post. You've built something unique here, a place outside the system, but not outside the law. It won't be easy keeping it that way. Nothing worth doing is easy, Kaya replied. True enough. For what it's worth, you have allies. Not everyone in the Army is corrupt. Some of us still believe in protecting people rather than property. That's good to know. We'll need allies. 2 months after the siege, Two Hearts Village had transformed from refugee camp to thriving community. 150 people now, with more arriving weekly. Word spread through underground networks. Apache, Navajo, Mexican, Chinese. Even white families fleeing poverty or prejudice, or the grinding machinery of westward expansion. They built a school where children learned Apache, Spanish, and English, where history was taught from multiple perspectives instead of just the victor's version, where Little Eagle, fully recovered from smallpox, learned to read in 3 languages. They built a clinic where Kaya and the Apache healers combined traditional medicine with what Jacob had taught them about sanitation and disease. The smallpox outbreak had taught harsh lessons. They wouldn't be caught unprepared again. They built a council house where decisions were made by consensus rather than decree, where women's voices carried equal weight to men's, where the young could speak and the old would listen. And they built homes mixing Apache wickiups with log cabins with Adobe Mexican style. Architecture as cultural fusion, form following the function of survival. Jacob watched it all from his cabin on the high ridge. He'd moved back to the outskirts, needing solitude even as he remained connected to the community. Every few days, he'd come down with fresh meat from hunting. He'd teach a class on wilderness survival. He'd maintain the defensive fortifications that ring the village. But he never stayed long. The ghosts were quieter now, but they hadn't left entirely. He still needed the mountains, the silence, the space to remember without drowning. One evening, Kaya climbed to his cabin with a purpose in her stride. She found him whittling by firelight, always whittling, hands needing tasks to keep the mind occupied. "We're having a naming ceremony tomorrow for the children born in the village. I want you there." "I ain't good with ceremonies." "You're good with people, even if you pretend otherwise." She sat beside him. "Jacob, you can't hide up here forever." "I'm not hiding. I'm maintaining necessary distance." "From what? From people who care about you? From a community you helped build?" He set down his carving. "From the possibility of failing again. Every time I let myself care, everyone I care about dies." That's survivor's guilt talking. Rebecca and Lily didn't die because you cared about them. They died because evil men did evil things. The caring wasn't the problem. Felt like it was. Feelings aren't facts. She put her hand on his arm. "You taught me to fight, to survive, to believe I was worth saving. Now I'm teaching you. You're worth saving too. And you're allowed to live, not just exist." He was quiet for a long time. Then quietly, "What if I don't know how anymore?" "Then you learn, same way I'm learning, one day at a time." The naming ceremony was held at sunset, a fusion of Apache tradition and new customs created for this new community. Each family brought their children forward, spoke their names, spoke their hopes. When Little Eagle was presented, her mother said, "She is called Little Eagle because she flies despite being small. She survived the white man's plague because the bridge woman carried her. Her life is proof that bridges matter more than boundaries." Jacob watched from the edge of the gathering, uncomfortable but present. Kaya saw him there and smiled. Small victory. After the ceremony, as people shared food and stories, a wagon appeared on the village outskirts. A family, clearly exhausted, clearly desperate. White father, Apache mother, 3 mixed blood children. Kaya greeted them. "Welcome to Two Hearts Village." The father's voice shook. "Is it true that you take anyone? We've been turned away from 5 towns. Reservations won't accept us because of me. White settlements attack us because of my wife. You're safe here, all of you." The mother, Apache with Spanish features, studied Kaya's face. "I know you. Your mother was Blue Heron. You knew her? She delivered my first child 12 years ago before the soldiers came." The woman's eyes filled. "She told me the old ways were dying, but new ways were being born. That my children would be bridges between worlds. I didn't understand then. Do you understand now?" "Yes, you're what she meant, the bridge." Kaya felt the weight of that title, the responsibility and possibility wrapped together. She was building her mother's vision without even realizing it. That night, she stood on her hillside, watching the village settle into sleep, fires burning, children tucked safely into beds. Adults planning tomorrow's work, community thriving. Dakota found her there. "You look troubled." "Not troubled, overwhelmed. We've built something important, but I don't know if it can last. The government wants these lands. Railroads are coming. Settlers push west every day. How long before they crush us? Maybe forever, maybe a year. But that's tomorrow's worry. Tonight we exist. Tonight we're free. Count that as victory." My mother used to say something similar. "Live in the moment because the moment is all we truly have." She was wise. She was murdered by men who feared wisdom. Then we honor her by refusing to be murdered, by surviving with want instead of just of fear. He put his arm around her shoulders, cousin and friend and fellow survivor. "You did good, Nolan. Better than any of us dreamed." She leaned against him, drawing strength from family that had betrayed her and then redeemed itself through action. Forgiveness was complicated, healing was messy. But both were possible if you chose them. In his cabin, Jacob sat alone with a bottle of whiskey he hadn't opened in 5 years. Stared at it, thought about Rebecca, about Lily, about all the ways a man can punish himself for crimes real and imagined. Then he stood, walked outside, and poured the whiskey onto the ground, an offering to the ghosts or a refusal to join them. Maybe both. He looked down at Two Hearts Village, golden with firelight, alive with possibility. All right, he said to the darkness, to Rebecca's memory, to whatever God might be listening. I'll try. I'll try to live instead of just surviving. The mountain wind carried his words away, but for the first time in 5 years, he felt like maybe someone heard them. 3 months later, spring came to the mountains. Snow melted, wildflowers bloomed. The village prepared fields for planting, mixing Apache Three Sisters with European grains. A circuit judge arrived, sent by sympathetic politicians in Denver to formalize the village's legal status. He spent 3 days reviewing their governance structure, interviewing residents, assessing the situation. His final report to the territorial governor was succinct. Two Hearts Village represents the best of frontier experiment. Self-governing, productive, causing no trouble for neighboring settlements. I recommend formal recognition as an independent municipality with full legal protections. It wasn't a reservation, it wasn't a territory, it was something new. A place where citizenship wasn't based on blood quantum or land ownership, but on the simple choice to belong. The recognition came with a caveat. They'd need to establish formal trade relationships, pay territorial taxes, maintain their own law enforcement. Full independence meant full responsibility. Kaya stood before the village council with the judge's letter. This is what we wanted, legal recognition, protection under law, but it comes with obligations. Are we ready? Dakota spoke first. We've survived the army, disease, and our own doubts. Paperwork doesn't scare me. Shaw added, I can help navigate the bureaucracy. That's what allies are for. Thomas said simply, my mother has a home for the first time in 40 years. I'll do whatever it takes to keep it. The vote was unanimous. Two Hearts Village became official. That evening they celebrated, Apache drums mixing with Mexican guitars, children dancing, adults laughing, the kind of joy that comes from survival, earning itself a future. Jacob came down from his cabin for the celebration, stayed for hours instead of his usual brief appearance, even danced once, awkwardly, with Little Eagle who insisted the gray ghost needed to learn how. Kaya watched him with something between pride and relief. He was healing. Slowly, but healing. Near midnight, a lone rider approached. Old man on an older horse, wearing travel-stained clothes and carrying news in his weathered face. Jacob recognized him. Samuel, what brings you down from Montana territory? Samuel was an old trapper Jacob had known from his fur trading days before the war. One of the few men who'd never asked why Jacob disappeared into the mountains. History, change, the kind of thing I thought you'd want to know about. Samuel accepted water, drank deep. Railroad's coming. Union Pacific is surveying routes through this region. They'll be here within 2 years. The celebration paused. Railroads meant settlers, meant towns, meant the frontier closing and civilization spreading like floodwater. What does that mean for us? Kaya asked. Means you need to get your legal status locked down tight. Means you need to make yourselves valuable to the railroad rather than obstacles. Means adaptation or extinction, same as it's always been. Shaw frowned. We could offer right-of-way, controlled access through our land in exchange for commercial rights at the rail stop. That would work. Railroad gets what it wants without fighting. You get economic connection without losing autonomy. Jacob pulled Kaya aside. This is bigger than village governance. This is negotiating with the machinery of westward expansion. You need representation in Denver, someone who understands both worlds. Shaw? He's the best choice. Former military, educated, white man who chose conscience over comfort. The government types will listen to him where they might ignore you. I don't like sending anyone away. We need everyone here. You need to think long-term. One man in Denver doing diplomacy might save the whole village from being overrun. She knew he was right. Leadership meant making hard choices. Shaw accepted the assignment. I'll leave next week. Set up a permanent liaison office. Make sure when decisions about this region are made, our voice is in the room. How long will you be gone? As long as it takes. Could be months, could be years, but this is too important to have to. The celebration resumed, but the tone had changed. Awareness of impending change colored everything. The railroad was coming. The future was coming. They'd survived the past, but now had to negotiate with the future. Late that night, after everyone else had gone to sleep, Kaya found Jacob sitting by the dying fire. Can we survive what's coming? She asked. Maybe, if you're smart and careful and lucky. He poked the embers, sending sparks skyward. The world's changing. You can't stop that, but you can shape how the change affects you. I'm scared, not of bullets or disease, but of losing what we built, of the railroad bringing people who don't understand, who don't care. Then you teach them to care. Make the village so valuable, so necessary, that destroying it would hurt them too. That's how you survive empires. Not by fighting them head-on, but by making yourself essential. Is that what you did in your years alone? No, I hid, Ibram. I punished myself for crimes that were already committed. He met her eyes. Don't be like me, Kaya. Don't waste years on guilt when you could spend them building something better. You're not wasted. You saved me. You helped build this village. Only after 5 years of doing nothing. 5 years Rebecca and Lily were dead while I pretended being alone was nobility instead of cowardice. It was grief. That's not the same as cowardice. Maybe, but I'm done grieving. Your mother, Blue Heron, she taught me to see Apache people as human. You taught me to see myself as human again. That's worth living for. They sat in comfortable silence watching the fire die to embers. Around them, the village slept in peace. Hard-won peace. Fragile peace. But peace nonetheless. The spring turned to summer. The village grew to 200 people. Fields produced their first harvest, modest but promising. Trade relationships formed with neighboring settlements. The legal recognition held despite challenges from hostile politicians. Shaw sent monthly reports from Denver. Progress was slow but steady. He'd formed alliances with reformers, with journalists, with anyone who believed the frontier could be settled without genocide. Jacob made his peace with the village, moved his cabin closer, to the edge rather than the heights, started teaching full-time, training young people in wilderness survival and defensive tactics. The community's warrior scholar. People called him. Thomas Littlefoot married one of the Apache women whose life Kaya had saved during the smallpox outbreak. Their wedding mixed Crow, Apache, and white traditions into something uniquely theirs. Dakota became grandfather to Little Eagle, adopting her after her mother died from complications of the smallpox 6 months later. The disease had weakened her beyond recovery. He taught her Apache ways with the patience of a man who'd learned that culture survived through teaching, not exclusion. And Kaya led, not perfectly. She made mistakes. She struggled with decisions that affected people's lives. She carried the weight of leadership like a physical burden on her shoulders. But she led with heart, with courage, with the understanding that bridges had to be built from both sides. 1 year after the siege, they held a remembrance ceremony, honoring those who died, celebrating those who survived, acknowledging that the struggle wasn't over, but that they'd earned the right to rest briefly. Kaya spoke to the assembled village. We started as refugees, outcasts, people the world had decided weren't worth saving. We proved them wrong, not through violence, though we fought when we had to, but through building, through choosing community over isolation, through refusing to let other people's hate define our worth. Jacob stood at the back, listening, proud. His ghosts were quiet now, not gone. Ghosts never truly leave, but they'd made peace with the living. After the ceremony, Little Eagle approached him shyly. Grandfather Gray Ghost, will you teach me to shoot like you? I'm not your grandfather, little one. Yes, you are. Dakota says family isn't blood. It's who stands with you when the world says fall down. You stood with us. So you're family. Out of the mouths of children, truth. All right then, tomorrow at dawn, bring focus and patience. I'll bring the rifle. She ran off squealing with joy. Kaya appeared beside him. Grandfather Gray Ghost? Don't start. Too late. That's your name now. The village has spoken. He tried to look annoyed but couldn't quite manage it. Children have no respect. They have lots of respect. That's why they want you to teach them. They walked together toward the edge of the village, looking out over the valley that had been a battlefield and was now becoming farmland. Do you think we'll survive the railroad? Kaya asked. I think you'll adapt. That's what you do, what you've always done. And you, will you stay? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, yeah, I'll stay. Someone needs to keep you from getting too confident. Before heading back to the village, Jacob did something he'd avoided for 5 years. He walked to the burned ruins where his old cabin once stood, half a mile from the village edge. Kaya started to follow, but he raised a hand. Need to do this alone. He knelt in the ashes and charred timber, the place where Rebecca had laughed, where Lily had taken her first steps, where his life had ended and his penance had begun. I tried, he said to the ghosts, tried to make it mean something. Protected people who needed protecting. Built something you'd be proud of. His voice cracked. I hope. Von, I hope that's enough. The wind carried no answer, but he didn't need one anymore. The guilt would always be there. Rebecca and Lily would always be gone, but the guilt no longer defined him. The dead wanted him to live. Kaya had taught him that. He placed 2 smooth river stones on the site, one for Rebecca, one for Lily, not a grave marker. A promise, I'll carry you forward, but I won't let you drag me down. Then he walked back toward Two Hearts Village, toward the living, toward home. Kaya was waiting at the edge. She didn't ask what he'd done. She just walked beside him as the sun set. She laughed, the sound bright and young and full of hope. Thank you for everything, for being the father I needed when I had none. Thank you for being the daughter I lost, for giving me a reason to stop dying. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in amber and gold, the same amber as Kaya's eyes. Blessed by dawn, her mother had said, tomorrow would bring new challenges. The railroad, settlers, the ever-present threat of those who feared change. But tonight, Two Hearts Village stood, a testament to survival, to resistance, to the revolutionary act of building community in a world designed to tear it apart. And 2 ghosts, one Apache and one white, stood together watching the darkness come. No longer haunted, no longer lost. Just 2 people who'd found each other in the wilderness and built a home from the ruins of their pasts. The circle complete at last.